I knew only one rule: if you want to survive, pretend you're nobody. That rule had carried me through years of fists, cages, and crowds that screamed for blood. It carried me now, dressed in the uniform of the elite district security, standing among men who had no idea what kind of monster they'd just hired. On paper, I was a beta. Nothing special. No threat. Just another body in the endless line of guards hired to keep the glass towers and manicured parks safe. The elite district was a cage of its own, only shinier. Glass buildings caught the sunlight like knives. Perfect hedges lined the walkways, too neat, too trimmed, as if chaos itself wasn't allowed inside. Cameras blinked on every corner, but the real watchful eyes were the alphas stationed at every gate. They moved like predators in suits, scanning for weakness, and in the middle of them stood him. Jer, commander, 30 years old, broad-shouldered, built like a fortress, with eyes that cut sharper than any blade. He didn't just look at you, he measured you, like a man deciding if you were worth saving or breaking. His gaze locked on me the moment I stepped into formation. "You're the new one," he said, voice even, carrying enough weight that half the squad stiffened. "Depends," I answered. "Do I look new?" The corner of his mouth twitched, almost a smirk, but it died quickly. "Beta. Transfer papers from the East Gate unit. 2 years on patrol." "Wow," I said lightly. "You read fast." Jer didn't smile. He just kept staring, as if peeling layers off me. I could almost feel his instincts pressing down, like he was trying to drag out whatever secret I carried. My pulse stayed steady. Years of fighting taught me one trick: never let an alpha think he's in control. "Stay sharp," he said at last. "This district doesn't tolerate mistakes." "Good," I muttered. "Neither do I." The day passed in the sterile rhythm of patrols. Nothing happened, because nothing ever happened here. The district was a bubble of wealth, protected by walls, scanners, and contracts thicker than a Bible. That was why I took the job. A place this quiet was the last place anyone would come looking for me. At least, that was the plan. Night fell too cleanly in the district. Street lamps hummed, washing the glass towers in sterile light. I was halfway through a circuit when the alarm shattered the silence. "Intrusion. Sector 9. The voice blared through comms, clipped and sharp. Guards scrambled. Doors locked. Residents were funneled into shelters by drones. It was chaos, the kind only outsiders could bring. Jer's voice thundered through the channel. "Form up. Hold Sector 9 perimeter." When I reached the scene, I found him already surrounded. Half a dozen figures in black gear had broken through the line. They weren't thieves. They weren't random rioters. Their movements were precise, trained, soldiers, and Jer was boxed in. For a split second, I hesitated. Pretend you're nobody. Fade back. Let the alphas handle their own mess. But the look in his eyes, focused, unyielding, sparked something reckless in me. I stepped forward. "Newbie, fall back," someone shouted. I didn't. One of the intruders lunged, blade flashing. My body moved before my brain caught up. I caught his wrist, twisted, and drove my knee into his gut. He folded, and I spun him into the second man's path, sending them both crashing into the pavement. Gasps rippled through the guards. I didn't stop. Another came at me with a stun baton. I ducked, swept his legs, and slammed him down with a crack that made the crowd flinch. My knuckles stung, but I welcomed it. The pain kept me sharp. Every strike, every breath was controlled. Efficient, ruthless. It felt like being back in the cage, the roar of the crowd replaced by the sterile hum of security lights. 1, 2, 3. They dropped in sequence, my body remembering every brutal lesson I'd sworn to bury. Jer moved too, cutting through the attackers with soldier's precision, but his eyes kept flicking toward me. Watching, measuring. The last intruder tried to run. I caught him by the collar, drove him into the wall, and left him crumpled on the ground. Silence. The squad stared. Alphas who prided themselves on dominance and strength gaped at the beta, who had just taken down a trained strike team with his bare hands. Jer's chest rose and fell steadily, but his gaze burned into me. Not shocked, not grateful, Something sharper. I straightened, wiping blood from my knuckles, forcing a smirk onto my face. What? Never seen a beta throw a punch? His jaw tightened. No, he said slowly. Not like that. And I knew in that moment that I'd broken my own rule. I wasn't nobody anymore. The bodies were cleared. The alarms silenced. Sector 9 was secure again, at least on paper. But my hands still shook, not from fear. Fear had been beaten out of me years ago, but from the restraint I forced on myself. Every punch, every strike had threatened to tear down the walls I'd built to stay hidden. The squad dispersed in groups, hauling the intruders into containment vans. Soon it was just Jer and me left at the edge of the shattered streetlights. He stood a few paces away, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. I forced a steady breath and leaned against the wall, my body finally acknowledging the weight of the fight. Sweat clung to my skin, and with it, damn it, my control slipped. It was faint at first, a whisper in the air, but I knew the moment it reached him. Jer's head turned sharply, nostrils flaring, eyes narrowing with something primal. His entire body went rigid, like a predator catching the scent of prey. No, not prey, something else. His aura pressed harder, instincts surging through the air between us. The command to yield, to bow, to submit. It came off him like heat from a fire. Stop, I snapped before he even opened his mouth. His gaze sharpened. That scent. Don't, I growled, pushing off the wall. My muscles locked, ready to fight him if I had to. Don't say it. Don't even think it. His jaw flexed, eyes glinting with recognition. You're no beta. I took a step closer, low and dangerous. Try calling me anything else, Commander, and see what happens. The weight of his presence pressed down harder, but I'd spent years training. My body not to bend, not to shake, not to give him the satisfaction. My heart hammered, but my voice came out steady, sharp as glass. You feel that? I said. That's me telling you to back off. For a long moment, silence stretched between us. Jer's stare burned into mine, unflinching, like he wanted to break me open and read the truth in my bones. His instinct screamed for me to yield, but mine screamed louder, never again. Then, heavy footsteps approached. Commander, a voice called out. It was Leon, one of his lieutenants, young, cocky, an alpha with more pride than sense. He stopped when he saw us, saw me, and his eyes narrowed with suspicion. You, he said, pointing at me. That was quite a show. 6 trained men, downed like they were nothing. That's not how a beta fights. I smirked, folding my arms. Guess I missed the memo on how betas are supposed to lose. Leon didn't laugh. His gaze darted between me and Jer, sharp with calculation. Too sharp, too fast. Maybe you're hiding something. Or maybe you're just jealous. I shot back. Not my fault you swing like a drunk in the dark. Jer's eyes flicked toward Leon with warning, but the younger man didn't back down. His suspicions stuck like a knife in the air. Enough, Jer said finally, his voice cutting through the tension. Report back. Secure the perimeter. Leon's jaw clenched, but he saluted and turned away, throwing me one last glance that promised trouble later. When he was gone, Jer looked back at me. The pressure of his presence hadn't faded. If anything, it had sharpened, as though he was fighting himself. You expect me to ignore this? He said quietly. I expect you to mind your own business, I shot back. His lips pressed into a thin line. For the first time, he looked almost unsettled. That scent doesn't lie. Neither do I. My voice was a razor. I told you, I'm beta. End of story. We stood there, locked in silence, the night around us humming with unresolved tension. Jer's gaze lingered on me, unreadable but heavy with something that went beyond command or instinct, as if he wasn't sure if he wanted to control me or protect me. And me? I hated the way my chest tightened under that look. I turned away, forcing a laugh that tasted bitter. You really want to play this game, Commander? Fine, but you'll lose. For the first time since I met him, Jer almost smiled. Not kind, not soft, something sharp, like he'd just accepted a challenge he couldn't resist. And that scared me more than any fight ever had. The training hall reeked of metal and sweat, the kind of place where egos bled faster than knuckles. Wide mats stretched across the floor, ringed with racks of weapons no one was allowed to use unless Jer gave the order. And tonight, he had. The squad gathered in loose circles, murmurs rolling through the room like an undercurrent. I felt their eyes on me, on the newcomer who dropped 6 armed intruders without breaking a sweat. Whispers carried suspicion, envy, curiosity. Alphas never liked when someone upset their carefully balanced hierarchy. Jer stepped into the center of the mat, bare hands, steady stance, his black training shirt clinging to broad shoulders. He didn't need to posture. His authority filled the room by itself. "Cris," he said evenly, nodding toward me. On the mat, I arched a brow. "You sure?" I wouldn't want to bruise the commander's pride. A ripple of laughter broke among the squad. Jer didn't smile. He just tilted his head, a silent command. I sighed, tugged off my jacket, and stepped forward. My boots echoed on the mat, every step deliberate. The air thickened the moment I faced him. Alphas radiated dominance, but Jer's was different, controlled, heavy, like a storm waiting for permission to break. "Test match," he said, voice carrying across the hall. "Standard rules, no weapons, no excuses. Fine by me." The whistle blew. He moved first, fast for his size, closing the distance with a soldier's precision. His hand reached for my collar, a textbook grappling start. I ducked, pivoted, and his arm met air. My counterstrike skimmed just past his ribs, deliberate. Not a miss, a warning. Jer's eyes narrowed. The squad muttered, "Betas weren't supposed to move like that." He pressed harder. Every motion radiated alpha strength, each strike like a hammer, each step forward demanding space. He wanted me to bend, to break, to give him the satisfaction of dominance. I gave him nothing. I slipped past, weaving, redirecting his weight, letting him crash into shadows I left behind. My body flowed with the rhythm of survival, the dance of cage fights I never wanted to remember. We circled each other, closer, closer. Our breaths mingled, harsh and quick. His hand caught my wrist. Heat shot through me. I twisted, chest brushing his, breaking the hold in a movement that looked too much like a dancer's spin. It wasn't just combat, it was intimate, dangerous. Every strike brought us face to face, every counter a brush of skin, every block a reminder of the pull neither of us wanted to name. "You're holding back," Jer muttered, low enough only I could hear. I smirked, my breath hot against his cheek. "Because I don't want to kill my commander on my first week." The words lit something in his eyes. Not anger, not fear, something hungrier. Gasps rose from the squad as Jer lunged, catching my shoulder, slamming me toward the mat. I twisted at the last second, rolling us both, breaking free. My elbow pinned his arm for a heartbeat, our faces inches apart. Too close, too loud, the sound of blood rushing in my ears, the thrum of instincts I'd buried. I shoved off him, standing fast, breathing sharp. My chest heaved, not from exhaustion, but from the tension threatening to snap. The squad fell silent. Some smirked, some frowned. All of them felt the electricity crackling in the air. Jer rose slowly, never breaking eye contact. His composure was flawless, but I saw it, the flicker of the beast straining at its leash behind his gaze. Enough. I stepped back, wiped sweat from my face, and let my voice cut through the heavy silence. "Fun as this dance is, I think we've given the audience a good show." And before he could answer, I turned my back on him and walked off the mat. Gasps, whispers. No one turned their back on an alpha commander, but I did. Jer's stare burned into my shoulders as I left, and I knew one thing for certain. I hadn't won that fight. Neither had he. We'd just started something neither of us could stop. The night was too quiet. Even in the elite district, silence like that meant trouble. The hum of street lamps seemed louder than usual, shadows stretching longer between the manicured hedges. My gut tightened before the first shot rang out. Intrusion. Sector 12. The comms burst alive with panic. Shouts, scrambling orders, the sharp crack of weapons. Jer's voice cut through the chaos, steady as a blade. Form on me! Hold the line! I was already moving. The attackers came fast, too fast. Black-clad figures poured out of the alleys, hitting weak points with surgical precision. They weren't testing the walls. They were inside, moving as if they'd studied every inch of the district. And this time, they didn't scatter fire across the squad. They pushed straight through, their eyes locking onto me. I felt it in my bones. They weren't here for the district. They were here for me. Jer didn't hesitate. He stepped into their path, his presence like a wall of iron. I slid beside him, our movements clashing and blending at once. Left, he barked. I dropped low, sweeping 2 attackers off their feet. Jer's fist cracked another's jaw, sending him sprawling. Our rhythm clicked, shield and blade, strength and speed. But every strike against me was sharper, hungrier. Their focus didn't waver. Even when Jer drove them back, they twisted past him, lunging at me with brutal intent. My body reacted before thought. Years of training, experiments I never asked for, instincts carved into my muscles. I moved faster than any beta should. My feet barely touched the ground, hands finding throats, joints, weak points with terrifying ease. It should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like exposure. Jer noticed. I saw it in the flicker of his eyes each time I moved too quickly, too precisely. He was a soldier. He knew what normal looked like. And I wasn't it. One attacker's blade sliced across my arm. Pain flared hot and sharp, stealing my breath. Blood soaked through fabric, and suddenly the world tilted. Cris. Jer's voice roared, closer than I realized. His arm locked around me, dragging me back as bullets sparked against the walls. He shoved me behind cover, pressing his shoulder against mine as we both panted in the dim alley light. My blood dripped onto the pavement too red, too fast. Jer's face loomed close, sharp with fury. You knew. I clenched my jaw, fighting to keep my voice steady. Knew what? His eyes burned. That they weren't after this place. They were after you. I laughed, bitter, shaky. I've been waiting my whole damn life for them to come back. The words slipped out before I could stop them. Jer went still. The street noise faded behind us. Just the echo of our breathing in the shadows. His jaw tightened, fists curling against the wall. Rage flickered across his features, but it wasn't aimed at me. It was something else, darker, sharper. The realization that he'd almost lost control of the fight, not because of poor planning, but because of me. Because I was a target he hadn't known existed. I don't care what you are, he said, low and fierce, like he was swearing an oath. I'm not letting them take you. The weight of his words pressed against the throbbing wound in my arm, heavier than the pain itself. My chest tightened, not from fear but from something far more dangerous. For the first time in years, someone's instinct wasn't to use me. It was to protect, and I didn't know what terrified me more. The medbay smelled too clean. Disinfectant and recycled air, the kind of sterile that never washed away blood or secrets. I sat on the edge of the examination table, arm bandaged, shirt discarded. Under the harsh white light, I had nowhere to hide. Jer leaned against the wall across from me, arms crossed, eyes locked like chains. He hadn't spoken since dragging me here. Not one word, not one question. But his silence was heavier than any interrogation. It pressed against me until I broke. You were right, I said finally, my voice rough. They weren't after the district. They were after me. Jer didn't move, but something in his expression shifted, tighter, darker. I'm not what you think I am. That earned a flicker of reaction. He straightened slightly, his stare sharpening. I exhaled, forcing the words out before I lost my nerve. I wasn't born like this. I was made. Silence. My hands curled into fists against my knees. There was a program, underground, funded by people who wanted perfect weapons, soldiers who wouldn't question orders, who could kill without hesitation. Omegas stripped of choice, trained to fight like predators, conditioned to ignore instincts. They called us assets. Numbers. I was 27 to 4. The memories clawed at me. White rooms, cold restraints, needles, piercing skin, the crack of bone on bone in cages where men bet their lives away on how long we'd last. I lifted my shirt enough to show the scars, thin, pale lines across ribs, the round marks of old injections up my spine. My body was a map of every time they'd tried to break me. Jer's eyes darkened, and for once it wasn't anger aimed at me. It was fury aimed outward, the kind of rage that could level walls. "They built you," he said quietly, voice like a storm. "They tried," I answered bitterly. "I ran before they finished." My chest tightened. Admitting it felt like stepping back into their cages. And now, they want me back. Jer's jaw clenched. His fists curled at his sides, veins standing out like cords. For a moment, he looked like he'd tear through walls just to reach the people who'd touched me. "You're not an asset," he said finally, low but firm. "You're not theirs." I wanted to believe that. God, I wanted to. But the memory of cold steel cuffs around my wrists whispered otherwise. Footsteps broke the moment. The door slid open, and Syra, the unit's medic, stepped inside. She was calm, efficient, her long braid swinging as she tapped a datapad. "Cris, I ran your vitals." My stomach dropped. She frowned at the screen. "Your hormone suppression levels are unusual. Too low for a beta, too controlled for an omega. And your reflex scans, off the charts. I've never seen anything like it." Jer's gaze flicked to me, and I caught the unspoken thought. "She's close. I just heal fast," I said quickly, forcing a smirk I didn't feel. "Good genes." Syra didn't smile. Her eyes lingered too long, curious, suspicious. Then she nodded slowly. "We'll run a follow-up." She left, the door sliding shut behind her, but the air stayed thick. Jer's stare pinned me again. "How long until they figure you out?" "Not long," I admitted. "They always do." Before he could answer, another shadow crossed the doorway. Leon. He leaned against the frame, arms folded, wearing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Commander." "Newbie." His tone dripped with mock respect. Jer's body tensed, but Leon's gaze locked on me. "Funny thing, people are talking about how a so-called beta fought like 3 alphas combined, about how you smell different sometimes." My pulse spiked. I masked it with a lazy grin. "Maybe they just need better noses." Leon chuckled, low and humorless. "Maybe. Or maybe you're hiding something. And when I find out what, everyone will know." He left before Jer could bite back, leaving his words hanging like smoke. I exhaled slowly, my chest tight. They were closing in. From the outside, from the inside. Enemies in black gear. Enemies in the same uniform. My secrets unraveling one thread at a time. And beneath it all, the fear I couldn't shake, that they wouldn't just catch me. They'd drag me back, to cages, to numbers, to being nothing more than a weapon with no name. I clenched my fists until my nails cut skin. I would die before I let that happen, but a whisper in my head betrayed me. What if Jer won't let you die? What if he drags you out of every fight, no matter what you want? That thought scared me more than the system ever had. The base was never meant to smell like this. It was supposed to reek of oil, metal, sweat, the living pulse of a training facility. But now the air was thick with iron, sharp and wet, smeared across the concrete floors. Sirens wailed overhead, broken and jagged, cutting through the dim red emergency lights that painted the corridors like arteries. We were already too late. Sector 3 breached. Jer barked into comms, his voice steady even as chaos roared in the background. Gunfire echoed down the halls, punctuated by screams and the heavy thud of bodies hitting the floor. I tightened the strap on my gloves, blood pounding in my ears. This wasn't a raid. It was a slaughter, and we were in the middle of it. Figures in black gear swarmed the halls, moving like they knew every turn, every blind spot. They didn't hesitate, didn't waste bullets. They came to kill, and they came for me. I felt their focus like heat on my skin. But Jer didn't falter. He stepped forward, broad shoulders filling the corridor, his presence a wall that refused to crack. I fell in beside him. Not behind, beside. The first wave hit us like a storm. Jer absorbed the impact, body solid as stone, catching strikes, shoving enemies back with bone-crushing force. Where he stood, no one passed. And where I moved, no one stood. I slipped between shadows, my body reacting before thought. Knives in my hands, though. I carried none, every strike cutting down with precision, fast, efficient, merciless. The corridor became a rhythm, and we moved in sync, his shield, my blade. Left, he barked. I pivoted, ducking low to sweep the legs of two attackers. Jer's fist followed, hammering them into the wall before they could rise. Up front, I shouted, catching the gleam of a rifle. Jer's arm snapped up, blocking the shot, the bullet ricocheting off his vest. I darted forward, disarming the shooter with a twist and slamming him into the ground. The squad members behind us froze, stunned, not by the attackers, but by us. For the first time, I let him cover me. Jer's back pressed against mine as another wave poured in. His voice rumbled through my spine, steady and sure. "I've got your back." My throat tightened. Instinct screamed at me to pull away, to never let anyone stand so close. But instead, I stayed. Not used to trusting people, I muttered between breaths. "Get used to it," he shot back, swinging his arm like a battering ram that sent 3 men sprawling. Something shifted in me then. For once, I wasn't fighting alone. We spun, struck, blocked, perfect symmetry. Jer caught blades meant for me, and I cut down enemies that slipped past his guard. His presence filled every gap I couldn't reach, and I filled every space he left open. The attackers slowed. They weren't used to prey biting back, and certainly not with this kind of precision. Even their helmets couldn't hide the flicker of hesitation. One of them hissed into a calm, panicked, "Target not isolated. Repeat, target not isolated." Jer heard it too. His gaze flicked to me for half a heartbeat, and I saw it, the understanding. This wasn't about the base. It wasn't about the guards. It was me. Always me. I drove my fist into another jaw, teeth snapping under my knuckles. Blood sprayed, hot and sharp in the air. My chest heaved, every muscle burning, but I didn't stop. Neither did he. At the far end of the hall, the last few attackers faltered. Jer's glare pinned them in place, his shoulders squared like a fortress. I stepped forward, my body humming with lethal precision, daring them to take another step. They didn't. They retreated into the smoke, dragging their wounded with them, leaving. The floor littered with broken weapons and groaning bodies. Silence fell. I braced myself against the wall, sucking in ragged breaths. My arm burned, the earlier wound reopening, but I ignored it. Jer turned toward me, his chest rising and falling, sweat dripping down his temple. He looked at me, not as a commander, not as an alpha demanding obedience, but as someone who had fought shoulder to shoulder, who had seen me not as prey, not as an asset, but as an equal. "Cris," he said quietly, breaking the silence, "you don't have to fight alone anymore." For a second, I almost believed him. Almost. Because deep down, I knew the moment I trusted too much, someone would chain me again. Still standing there, blood soaking into the floor, Jer's presence at my back, I felt something I hadn't in years. I felt like more than a weapon. The alarms never stopped. They screamed through the base like a chorus of dying things, echoing down every corridor. Smoke bled from the vents, thick and acrid, mixing with the metallic stench of blood. The attackers hadn't given up. If anything, their assault had doubled. More boots thundered against the floors, more shadows cut through the flickering lights, and every one of them was coming for me. I could feel it, their precision, their relentless focus. They weren't here for Jer, not for the district, not even for the base. I was the prize, the asset they'd lost years ago, and now they meant to reclaim me, no matter the cost. Jer knew it too. I saw it in the way his jaw set, the way his eyes followed each movement not toward himself, but toward me. Another wave crashed through the corridor. Jer slammed into them, a wall of muscle and fury, buying me seconds. I tore through the gaps, fists finding throats and ribs, but my body screamed in protest. Every movement dragged fire across my injured arm. Still, I fought. I always fought, But even I could see the truth. There were too many. We ducked into a side passage, breaths ragged, backs against the wall. My chest heaved, sweat mixing with blood, my body a taut wire ready to snap. Jer's face was lit by the red emergency glow, and I knew that look. Cold, resolute, but edged with something dangerous. He'd made a decision. "They'll keep coming," he said, voice low but steady. "And the system, our system, will hand you over the second it's convenient." I froze. The words stung because they were true. I'd always known it. No matter how long I pretended to be beta, no matter how well I hid, sooner or later the truth would reach the wrong ears. And once it did, the people who owned me would come knocking, and the district would open the door for them. Jer stepped closer, his shadow towering, his eyes burning with something more than instinct. "I won't let them take you." The air crackled between us. My throat tightened. "I didn't ask for a shield." "I'm not asking," he shot back, voice sharp enough to cut through the din of battle. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Because alphas always wanted to command, to dominate. But his words weren't a command. They were a choice. His choice. Somewhere deep inside, something shifted. Boots thundered closer. Shouts echoed through the hall. The hunters tightening their net. We didn't have time to argue. Jer grabbed my wrist, not to control, not to force, but to pull me into motion. "We run," he said simply. It was betrayal. Against his command, against his unit, against the oath he'd sworn to the district. But it was the only way out. We tore through the corridors, weaving between flames and smoke. Gunfire sparked off metal walls, each impact ringing like a bell tolling our doom. Jer barreled through obstacles, smashing doors, hurling enemies aside like they were nothing. I slipped through the chaos, fast and sharp, cutting down anyone who tried to corner us. Together, we moved like one body, shield and blade. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was running alone. My lungs burned, every breath ragged, but my chest ached for another reason. I'd spent years telling myself trust was a weakness, that letting someone stand at my back would only end in betrayal. But Jer was still there, solid, unshakable, dragging me forward no matter how heavy the weight. I've always been nothing but a weapon, I thought bitterly. But maybe a weapon doesn't have to be alone. Jer's thoughts I couldn't hear, but I saw them in the lines of his face when he glanced at me through the smoke. Instincts pulled at him. I knew that. Alphas lived to dominate, to control. But what burned in his eyes wasn't hunger for obedience. It was the raw, stubborn fire of a man who had chosen to stand beside me. Not above, not over, beside. We burst into the outer corridors, the cool night air finally cutting through the smoke. Behind us, alarms still screamed, and voices shouted for pursuit. Jer pulled me close, his words a growl against the chaos. "From now on, it's us. No one else." I swallowed hard, chest tight. I wanted to argue, to push him away, to claim I didn't need anyone. But the words wouldn't come, because for the first time I believed him. We didn't look back. The edge of the district burned behind us. Towers of glass flickered like dying torches, flames reflecting off their sterile surfaces. The alarms had faded into the distance, but the night was far from silent, because they were waiting for us. Dozens of figures in black armor closed in, their boots pounding against the cracked asphalt of the outer perimeter. The air was heavy with smoke and the metallic bite of gun oil. There was no mistaking it. This was the final push. They'd chased us out of the base, out of the heart of the district, and now they meant to cage me for good. Jer stood beside me, shoulders squared, eyes fixed ahead. His presence was iron and fire, a wall that wouldn't crumble even with the world falling apart around us. My chest heaved, blood seeping through the bandage on my arm. My body screamed with exhaustion. But when Jer glanced at me, something steadied inside. "Ready?" he asked, voice even, calm as if we weren't staring down death itself. I smirked, wiping sweat from my brow. Always. The first wave surged forward. We moved. Jer hit them head on, a fortress of flesh and fury. His fists crashed through armor, his body absorbing blows that would have dropped another man. He was the shield, immovable, unshakable. I slipped into the gaps he left, weaving between strikes, every motion precise and deadly. My fists found throats, my feet shattered knees. Quick, sharp, merciless, the blade they'd forged me to be. And together, we carved a path through the storm. "On your right," I shouted. Jer swung wide, intercepting the attacker before their blade reached me. I spun past him, driving my elbow into another's jaw. We turned back to back, our movements so in sync it felt less like fighting and more like breathing. Enemies faltered, hesitated. Even they could see it. The shield and the blade moving as one, covering every angle, every weakness. But numbers had weight, and for every man we dropped, 3 more closed in. I barely saw the strike that should have ended me. A rifle raised, barrel flashing, too close, too fast. My body tensed for the impact. But Jer was there. He moved before I did, stepping in front of me, taking the hit. The bullet slammed into his side, knocking him back against me. Jer, rage burned white-hot in my chest. The world narrowed to the man who'd stood between me and death. My body reacted. No hesitation, no thought, just fury. I tore through the nearest enemies like paper, fists breaking bone, knees shattering ribs. They fell, one after another, until the ground was littered with their bodies. My vision blurred, every nerve alight, my blood singing with something savage and unstoppable. I dropped beside Jer, dragging him up. His face was pale, but his eyes burned steady. "You're insane," I growled, half choked, half shaking. "I told you," he rasped, coughing through the pain. "I've got your back." I hauled him up, throwing his arm over my shoulder. Together, staggering and bloodied, we pushed through the last of the line. The night opened before us, fields of shadow beyond the sterile walls of the district. Freedom, not safe, not certain, but ours. We collapsed against the outer ridge, breathing hard, bodies bruised and broken. For a long time, there was only silence, the wind tugging at the edges of my torn uniform. Then I said it, the words slipping out unbidden, bitter and raw. "Shield and blade, that's all we are. Not partners, not lovers, just weapons." Jer turned his head, his expression unreadable in the moonlight. Then his hand found mine, rough, calloused, warm even through the blood. "Wrong," he said simply. "We're love. And that's enough for me." The words cracked something deep inside, something I hadn't realized was still chained. My throat tightened, but I forced out a laugh, sharp and shaky. "You've got a messed up way of showing romance, Commander." Bleeding out all over me, dragging me into hell, calling it love. His lips twitched, the ghost of a smile. "You talk too much. Better than you. You've got the emotional range of a brick wall." His eyes softened, just enough that I saw it, the warmth he never showed anyone else. And for once, I didn't feel like a weapon. I felt like a man. We sat there in the dark, bruised and bleeding, the city behind us burning, the future uncertain. But for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of what came next. Because I wasn't alone.